overturning Roe v. Wade is a humanitarian crisis.
Abortion is healthcare.
2019년 4월 11일 대한민국에서 낙태죄는 헌법 불합치 판결을 받았다. 그런가 하면 49년간 헌법상 권리로 보장받았던 낙태권이 하루아침에 폐기된 나라도 있다. 미국이다. 지난 6월 미국 연방대법원이 로데웨이드 판결을 스스로 뒤집으면서 미국 전역에서 낙태권을 되찾기 위한 목소리가 터져나왔다. 한국 시간으로 8월 3일 기자들은 미국행 비행기에 올라 8월 5일부터 사흘간 텍사스주의 휴스턴과 오스틴에서 진행된 낙태권 옹호 시위 주간에 참석해 주의 상황을 함께했다.
When I heard about the Supreme Court ruling, I cried endlessly the whole day because this doesn't just affect adults and like my generation, but this affects my siblings' generations. This affects your sisters, brothers. It's not just affecting women or people with uteruses, but this is a personal decision for many genders, and this affects every other oppressed group.
텍사스는 역사 속에서 미국 공화당의 성지로 성장했다. 로데웨이드 판결이 뒤집히자 텍사스에도 반대 시위의 물결이 일었다. 사람들은 텍사스주의 상황에 격분했다.
Texas, it's always like it's very much messed up right now because Texas is a like Republican state, openly Republican state, has always been like like we have the worst cases of racism, we do have the worst cases of police brutality, and on top of that now with the abortion rights and everything being overturned, it's like I don't feel safe as a woman, I don't feel safe as an immigrant, I don't feel safe as a student. Like everywhere I go, I feel like I would be attacked, like I would be questioned. It's truly like scary for all of us, especially the women in Texas.
다음 날 기자들은 버스로 4시간을 달려 휴스턴에서 오스틴으로 이동했다. 기조연설이 끝난 후 사람들은 본격적으로 행진을 시작했다. 기자들도 그 행렬을 따라갔다. 행렬 속에 시위 참가자 한 분과 이야기를 나눠봤다. 그녀의 이름은 크리스티나였다.
What's your name?
Christina.
Are you a university student?
I'm sorry?
Are you a university student?
No, I'm not.
You're living in Austin?
Yes.
그녀의 가방엔 사람들에게 나눠줄 물이 가득했다. 사람들은 의회 방면으로 행진하며 낙태권 보장을 외치는 목소리를 높였다. 다음 날 오후 3시 오스틴의 파우드 라운지 바에서는 미국 전역의 낙태기금연합인 NFA가 주관한 자선 공연이 열렸다. 푸드트럭이 즐비한 공연 직전의 반은 분주한 분위기를 풍겼다. 스태프의 안내를 받아 입장하자 반가운 얼굴이 보였다. 전날 행진 시위에서 만났던 크리스티나였다.
So we are just trying to make the governors and the senators aware that we're pissed off about the decision to ban abortions within the state of Texas.
Like the trigger laws in wake of losing Roe with the Supreme Court decision threatens thousands, millions of lives. So we're here to fight for that right to be reestablished and protected under Texas law.
Yeah.
So we've got our two senators, the Attorney General and the Governor. So they're a team of decision makers who have enacted really hateful bills like SB 8.
And they're also trying to prohibit out-of-state travel for abortions as well, not just within Texas.
낙태권 자선 공연에서 만난 이들은 입을 모아 텍사스주에 사는 사람들도 자유롭게 의료 서비스에 접근할 수 있어야 한다고 말했다.
My job is to make sure that they get unfettered access to health care. That they can go and get the reproductive health care that they need because no matter how good my life is, it's immaterial for them, and more than that, it's not just access to abortion care, it's also an entire mental health and reproductive health care right, in the state of Texas.
시위는 오스틴 중심부에서 꽤 떨어진 작은 마을 라운드록에서도 진행됐다.
And we had so many people that we lined the street on both sides of Main Street. And so that was a very encouraging turnout. I can't tell you. It was amazing just to see so many people in this kind of red area, you know.
미국에서 낙태는 굉장히 정치화된 이슈다.
Can you explain more about how's the political landscape of this county?
But I will say it's probably a gradation from south to north, right? Of like bluer at the bottom. And then Round Rock, where we are currently, is pretty blue. But the further you go north, the more red it gets. You know, like we had one of these protests in Georgetown a few weeks ago. And it was the first time that we had any opposition. There was a group there at the courthouse, only about 15 or 20 people, but they were very loud. And they were singing, you know, religious songs and stuff, and it was kind of intimidating, honestly.
낙태권 옹호자들에 대한 위협은 실제로 존재한다. 2009년에는 오랫동안 낙태권 보장 운동을 했던 의사 조지 틸러가 캔자스주의 교회에서 총격을 받아 살해된 사건도 있었다.
So we decided to come back to Round Rock where we felt safer, honestly. And they don't require a permit. They're very nice. The police department stopped by and told us that they're going to be protective. And that's just, you know, when we were in Georgetown, the police didn't even, they didn't care that there were people with guns there. You know, they just didn't even come at all. They were just kind of like.
같은 시각 또 다른 곳에서 낙태권 보장을 향한 사람들의 열정은 계속 끌어오르고 있었다. 볼텍스에서 자선 공연의 연장선으로 오픈 마이크 행사가 열렸다.
All of the feelings and emotions that have come into this theater today have sort of reminded me of, and I just hope everyone leaves this space encouraged to scream and shout and say exactly how you fucking feel and not shove it down and not keep quiet because it makes other people.
돕스 판결은 각 지역의 산부인과 운영에 어떤 영향을 미쳤을까?
Well, it's definitely decreased access points and care points for women. Currently, I'm affiliated with a fertility clinic, and we're trying to help people get pregnant. But even in our clinics, sometimes we have miscarriages, sometimes we have ectopic pregnancies, and sometimes if you're catching it early enough, you can use medicine instead of surgery to treat, and the pharmacy wouldn't fill the medicine. So we had trouble getting access just to the medications to be able to treat the patient that medically needed that. Even the physicians, yes. And the concerns that have come from the medical, you know, the state medical bodies and the national medical bodies are that the confusion on what's legal and what's not legal is creating barriers not just in, you know, even if a provider is in the area and there's a board certified physician such as myself, if we're unclear of the laws, then that may create a delay in somebody getting timely and necessary care for what they need in their medical situation.
텍사스주에서 운영을 멈춘 산부인과를 발견할 수 있었다. 그렇다면 낙태를 실제로 경험한 이는 상황을 어떻게 평가할까? 낙태 경험자에게 현 시점의 낙태 접근성을 0에서 10까지의 숫자로 평가해달라고 했다.
I mean, right now it's a 0, -5. But at the time, when it was still technically legal, I would give Texas about maybe a 3. So the score went down last year, right, when SB 8 went into effect in the fall. That is a law that prohibited abortion after 6 weeks, which is basically when you find out you're pregnant. So it made abortion illegal for most people, most pregnant people.
로데웨이드 판결이 폐기된 현재 텍사스주 주민들이 낙태하기 위해서는 다른 주의 병원으로 가야 한다.
Again, California is one of those destination states where we see people from Nevada and Texas. Sometimes we've had callers come in from Hawaii. So it really just, It is nothing new. It's unfortunate and it's disturbing, especially when you look at the trends of social services in those red states. Almost always those states that have more restricted abortion services also have lower access to social services like primary care physicians for low-income people, paid time off, these kinds of things that are almost necessary if you're going to be a parent, right? These states tend to have lower access to these types of services, while at the same time they're rolling back abortion care. And it seems they also have some of the highest maternal mortality rates in the nation. And if any of these legislators actually cared about life and well-being, these are the things they would be focused on, not abortion access.
원격 의료 서비스를 이용한다면 어떨까? 웹사이트 검색을 통해 이를 찾아보기로 했다.
여기가 플랜C라는 사이트인데요. 미국에서 온라인으로 낙태약을 구하려면 이 사이트에 접속을 한다고 합니다. 그럼 저희가 실제로 Find Abortion Pills 이거 해볼게요. 네, 여기서 저희가 지금 텍사스주에 있다는 가정을 하고 있으니까 텍사스 골라주고, 네, 그럼 이렇게 텍사스로 검색을 하니까 두 가지 옵션이 뜨는 것 같아요.
에이드 어세스랑 텔레펜 멕시코의 차이가 뭐죠?
텔레펜 멕시코는 일단은 멕시코에 살거나 아니면 인근 구역에 살고 있는 사람만 가능한 것 같고요. 그리고 에이드 어세스는 이 텔레펜 멕시코보다는 저렴한데, 이거 여기 델리바리 보면은 기간이 길면은 3주 정도 걸린다고 되어 있거든요.
근데 여기 보시면 둘 다 임신 10주에서 12주 내로만 가능하다고 돼 있어서 만약에 임신 사실을 늦게 알게 될 때는 두 방법 모두 어려울 것 같아요.
그렇다면 로데웨이드 판결이 유효했을 때는 낙태에 어려움이 없었을까?
The specific laws that affected me, my experience, were the mandatory 24-hour waiting period that I mentioned before. Texas required that you have an ultrasound and a consultation, counseling with the doctor at least 24 hours before your abortion. And that in that counseling, they required the doctor to tell you all sorts of medical misinformation. So the doctor was required to tell me that my abortion would increase my risk of breast cancer, which is not true, that it would increase my risk of infertility, which is not true. But I mean, indirectly, there are lots and lots of policies that affect everybody's access to abortion care in Texas.
We call those trap laws, and really they're made in place to make abortion almost unattainable. If someone is, something like 65% of people who get abortion are below poverty level, that means taking 2 full days off of work to receive medical care is not just unrealistic, but would put that person in an even more complicated situation by losing 2 days worth of wages. Traveling to go get services, some people have to travel days to get to a clinic because their state no longer has any clinic that provides abortion health care. And it's made, those laws are designed to make it impossible for people to access the care that they need. That's simply, that has nothing to do with, your decision isn't made any better by waiting 24 hours once you've already driven to a clinic to receive the services. You know what you want and you know what you need to do for yourself.
Before Dobbs, before SB 8, it was so difficult for people to get an abortion in Texas that by the time they came to the clinic, their mind was already made up. Every once in a while, we'd have people come and, feel ambivalent, and, then we send them home and say, think about it, and come back. But most people are pretty sure. Now, things that changed after SB 8, because it put this sense of urgency on pregnant people. You find out you're pregnant and then you have no time, right? Most people find out around 4 weeks, maybe 5 weeks. And so you only have a few days to get it done. Before SB8, you could think about it a little bit. But what happened with SB8 is that the state imposed this arbitrary cutoff point, the sense of urgency, and said you only have a few days, maybe one day, to decide what you want to do.
병원을 찾고 진료를 예약하는데 어려움은 없었을까?
So I had my abortion in 2017 or 2016. I was 20 years old, so it was 6 years ago now. I was a student at UC Riverside, and I had a boyfriend at the time, and we were using birth control, and so I never thought that like I could get pregnant, but lo and behold, I got pregnant. And at this time in my life, I knew that I didn't want to be pregnant. I knew that I really wanted to finish school, and I had 2 more years to go, and I couldn't see myself graduating school with a child. I didn't know how far along I was. I didn't know like how many weeks I was. All I knew is that I was pregnant and that I wanted to get an abortion. I just went forward with the second referral that I was given, and with that second referral, they said I could have my appointment, but it was going to be like about a month and a half before I can get an abortion. So I waited, and then a week before my appointment, they call me and they tell me that they can't process my insurance, and that I was not on my student health insurance plan, but I was on CalOptima, and if I wanted to get any abortion care, that I needed to go back to my hometown in Orange County and get re-diagnosed about my pregnancy and get my abortion care in Orange County. And I didn't have a car, I didn't have any money, and if I was going to get billed through my old insurance, then my dad was going to receive the bill. And my parents didn't know that I was sexually active. I didn't know where to go, and at this point I hadn't told anybody because my boyfriend at the time told me to keep it a secret because he was embarrassed about the entire situation, and that made me feel ashamed about my situation too, even though I was the one who was pregnant and I was the one who was going to go through with a surgery for the both of us, for both of our futures. And from there, I finally broke down and I told a friend. So I ended up creating my own referral through my student health center and Planned Parenthood, and even that took some time. So at this point, it's December, and I had first gone to my student health center in September. And I knew I was like months pregnant at this point, but I was trying to get an abortion the whole time, but it just wasn't working out. So I don't exactly know how far along I was, but when I got to the Planned Parenthood, they said I was anywhere from like 18 to 20 weeks or something. Definitely in my second trimester already, and I had to get a surgical abortion.
For many years. Also, California is one of few states that use Title IX funding, which is federal funding, for abortion services. So unlike many other states, they don't restrict public funding for abortion. So despite being uninsured and unemployed at the time, I was able to get my abortion free of cost. My abortion, I was 10 weeks along, so I was able to have a medical abortion. When the nurse was available, they took me into an examination room to perform a sonogram to calculate the gestational period. Once she confirmed that I was within the 10-week, here in California, you can't take medication abortion after 10 weeks. So once she confirmed that I was within the 10 weeks, I was taken to a separate room where I talked to the clinician. The clinician explained how the medication works. The first one stops the blood flow to the uterus. Second one starts expulsion. And so she explained how it works. What are the different things that I can expect? She actually inquired whether or not my menstrual cycles were very difficult. I said that they were. So she prescribed me a painkiller.
And I remember being pregnant and one night like drinking like bottles of wine because I thought that if I gave myself like alcohol poisoning or something that I wouldn't be pregnant anymore. And at this point, I didn't know if I was going to get an abortion because everyone had been saying no. And I don't think people understand that when someone wants an abortion, you're not choosing to be pregnant and then like give your child away or give the child away, right? The decision to have an abortion is to not be pregnant at all. So feeling like you have no control over your body, and people respect that a lot more than choosing your own future. I don't understand it. And I don't think anyone will understand it unless they've lived through it. But I can tell you from my experience that living with an unwanted pregnancy was it was the worst 3 months of my life.
It should be about personal autonomy. It should be about every person knowing what's best for themselves and their life. For a lot of these people, it's not just, okay, what's best for me, it's also what's best for my family, right? What's best for the children that I already have, what's best for my future family. It's about economic stability, it's about financial freedom. The government should not be the thing that decides, right? Like, our elected officials are not the experts on what's best for me personally. And so that decision really should be left up to pregnant people.
Yeah, making something illegal impacts how people view it, especially how it's talked about in the media. There's been so much work over the last years to destigmatize abortion and be able to openly talk about it. And what many states are doing when they're criminalizing it, it's making it harder to have regular conversations about, again, basic healthcare needs. Abortion is not, abortion should not be singled out as some weird procedure. It's basic healthcare.
그렇다면 낙태권에 지대한 영향을 미쳤다는 로데웨이드 판결이란 무엇이며 미국 사회에서 어떤 의미를 가졌던 것일까?
Roe v. Wade was the Supreme Court case from 1973, which was the first time that the Supreme Court recognized that the U.S. Constitution protects the right to abortion. And it created a trimester system with different rules based on how far along in pregnancy the pregnancy was and whether or not you could restrict abortion during those stages.
그러나 로데웨이드 판결에서 임신 첫 3개월간 여성의 낙태권을 보장했던 것과 달리 케이스 판결에서 여성의 낙태권이 절대적으로 보호되는 기한이라는 개념은 사라졌다.
Well, the Supreme Court didn't overturn Roe v. Wade until this year. They have been chipping away at the Roe v. Wade standard for decades. One of the classic or biggest examples of this is the case of Planned Parenthood v. Casey from 1992, which upheld that there was a right to an abortion, which Roe found, but they got rid of the trimester framework that Roe had put in place, which had previously banned any restrictions on abortion in the first trimester, and opened the door for the precedent and the way that these cases were interpreted by courts to allow more and more restrictive abortion laws.
심사 기준이 완화되면서 이전에는 위헌으로 판결됐던 낙태 요건들이 다시 합헌으로 판결됐다. 각 주에서는 그런 요건들이 낙태를 더 안전하게 할 것이라고 주장했다. 그러나 실질적으로는 낙태를 제한하기 위해서였다.
For example, one of the laws that they were looking at that time were requirements that abortion clinics become ambulatory surgical centers, which requires them to have like an operating room and 6-foot hallways so that they can be rolling a hospital bed down the hall. None of that is necessary for an abortion. And the purpose there was really just to try to close clinics by making it really expensive to operate.
There's also some requirements that a provider show the patient an ultrasound image of the pregnancy, which research at Answer shows that doesn't dissuade people usually from having an abortion because patients know that they're pregnant. That's based on this idea that pregnant people who are getting abortions don't know what's going on in their body, but that's not the case. They know they're pregnant, they know what it looks like, and they still want an abortion.
그리고 2022년 5월 로데웨이드 판결을 뒤집는 내용의 돕스 판결문 초안이 유출됐을 때 미국 사회 전역은 발칵 뒤집어졌다. 그러나 6월 24일 최종 판결에서도 연방대법원은 초안의 입장을 고수했다. 낙태권은 미국의 역사와 전통에 깊이 뿌리내린 권리가 아니므로 수정헌법 제14조의 자유에 낙태의 자유가 포함되어 있다고 보기 어렵다는 말이다.
기본적으로 원의주의 입장에서는 우리가 일반적으로 말하는 자유가 다 기본권이 될 수 있는 것은 아니고, 이제 그 사람들 표현에 따르면 미국의 역사와 전통에 깊이 뿌리 내린 것이어야 한다는 거예요. 수정헌법 14조가 만들어질 당시에 어땠는지, 그 당시 주들을 보면 전체 주의 4분의 3이 낙태를 금지하고 처벌하고 있었다는 것이고, 근데 로우 판결이 선고될 때도 이미 한 50개 주 중에 30개 주는 낙태를 전면 금지하고 있었다. 그리고 나머지 주들도 낙태를 일부 허용하는 주들이 있었지만 적어도 로우 판결보다는 더 강하게 처벌했다. 이제 이런 논거들을 들어서 기본권이 아니다, 미국 헌법상, 이렇게 얘기하는 거죠. 사실 근데 그런 입장에 서게 되면 새로운 기본권을 인정할 가능성은 굉장히 적어지는 거죠.
로데웨이드 판결은 낙태할 권리를 사생활의 권리로 인정했다. 또 다른 문제는 사생활의 권리가 하나의 헌법 조항에 명시돼 있지 않다는 점이다.
Even among pro-choice activists and advocates, the Roe v. Wade decision was criticized for the fact that the court decided to recognize the right to abortion under the right to privacy.
그러다 보니 로데웨이드 판결이 뒤집히기 이전에도 낙태권이 프라이버시권이 아니라 평등보호 조항에 기초해야 한다는 대안적인 주장이 나왔었다.
And the argument would be that it is a violation of equal protection on the basis of sex or on the basis of being somebody who can get pregnant. Some people are able to access health care, and for example, women are not able to have comprehensive health care. I think now that Roe has been overturned, you're likely going to see equal protection arguments come up again, and that could be potentially a new avenue for arguing to find the right to abortion under the Constitution.
연방대법원이 주장하는 역사와 전통에 입각한 해석 자체는 법리적이었을지도 모르지만 그 해석이 미국 전역에 저항의 바람을 일으켰다는 사실은 주목할 만하다. 이 해석 뒤에 어떤 배경이 숨어 있던 걸까?
It's a 9-member court. Right now, we have 6 of them are opposed to abortion. But it's not the case that 6 out of 9 Americans are against abortion. It's just in the Supreme Court, and they were specifically selected to be opposed to abortion. Obama wasn't allowed to appoint one Supreme Court justice. If he had been able to fill that seat, it would have been filled by someone who was in favor of abortion rights. And then a year before Trump left, Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, and she was in favor of abortion rights, and she was replaced with someone who's opposed. So that combination meant that all of a sudden there was a majority of Supreme Court justices who were opposed to abortion. 5 of the 6 of them, I think, are Catholic, and Catholics are not such a big majority of the US population. So they don't currently represent public opinion.
미국에서 낙태가 처음부터 이렇게 정치적인 이슈였던 것은 아니다.
When the decision came out, it was largely popular. Even conservative religious groups who are now opposed to abortion were in favor of the decision because they felt that it gave people decision-making power and actually allowed people to make decisions based on their personal beliefs, including religious beliefs. But then several years after the decision, there was a political realignment where the Republican Party really picked up abortion as one of its main issues because they realized they could bring back together a voting coalition that they had lost control of. And so that's when you really start to see more and more restrictions on abortion being introduced and it be something that's talked about in every election cycle.
로데웨이드 판결은 한순간에 뒤집힌 것이 아니라 수십 년간의 긴 계획 끝에 뒤집힌 것이었다. 그리고 그 거대한 계획의 일부가 이미 모습을 드러낸 곳이 있었다. 텍사스주의 상원법안 8호였다.
Texas SB 8 is a law that allows anybody to sue somebody for either performing or, quote, aiding and abetting in an abortion. Because it's not enforced by the government but is enforced through private suits by civilians, it's been called a bounty hunter law or a vigilante law. And I think the reason that Texas took this approach when they passed this law is actually a bit of creative legislating because it makes the law incredibly difficult to challenge. Typically, when a state passes an abortion law that is unconstitutional, the way that it is challenged is advocates will sue the government because they are the people who are going to be enforcing this law. But in this situation, because the government is not allowed to enforce the law, it has to be through these private lawsuits. It makes it really difficult to challenge because you don't know who is going to be enforcing the law.
그러나 전문가들은 이런 상황이 영구적으로 이어질 거라고 단정하지는 않는다.
The reason this happened is not because the United States as a whole is becoming more conservative. It's this crazy coincidence of events meant that the Supreme Court had a majority of people who were religiously opposed to abortion. As soon as the Supreme Court grows, as soon as we have Democratic majorities in our House and Senate, this will change back. It's not a permanent trajectory that the United States is on.
로데웨이드 판결이 뒤집힌 것이 미국 국민 다수의 의견이라고 단정할 수 없다는 것은 캔자스주의 사례에서도 잘 드러난다.
In some states, surprisingly, a red state like Kansas recently passed through their election, their decision to keep their state open and supportive of abortion. That was a surprise given that it's a conservative state. We're coming up with preposterous barriers, more and more restrictions, to the point where I think some people in Kansas said, this is going too far. We are going to accept and vote for abortion just because we're going too far.
미국의 정치적 배경 아래 낙태는 여전히 범죄와 처벌의 영역에서 논의되고 있다. 그러나 낙태가 금지됐을 때 현실에서는 어떤 일이 벌어질까? 우선 로데웨이드 판결이 내려진 1973년 이전으로 돌아가 보자.
In those days, women who could travel and afford travel would go abroad. Like if you lived in the East Coast, you would go to Puerto Rico. Women in California used to go to Tijuana all the time. Tijuana, Mexico was kind of the capital of abortion.
But you also saw people often just taking matters into their own hands and unfortunately sometimes getting abortions in unsafe ways, whether that be the coat hangers that we see in imagery sometimes or going to people who did not have safe or clean instruments to perform abortions, even some people who died.
그렇다면 이런 상황에서 로데웨이드 판결은 어떤 의미였을까?
It meant that for the first time, women were going to have more rights, that they were going to be free to perform and make decisions around the bodies that they hadn't had before. And so I think overall there was a sense of freedom, liberation, less anxiety, and a lot more optimism. And I think there was a whole movement towards opening up better reproductive health care and choices, including contraceptive choices for women, and trying to make abortion for those women who needed it more accessible, more available, cheaper.
그러나 로데웨이드 판결이 뒤집힌 지금 약물 낙태가 불가능하고 수술을 받아야 하는 사람들이 선택할 수 있는 것은 낙태가 합법인 다른 주로 이동하는 것뿐이다.
And we recently published a study that found we expect an increase of 16,000 people coming to California every year from states where abortion will be banned. This is going to primarily, though, be people who have the resources to travel. And there will always be people who can't afford to travel, aren't able to take time away from their jobs or their children in order to go out of state to get an abortion. And so the impact of this decision will be felt most acutely on people with the least resources, who are likely going to have to either find a way to manage their abortion in state, maybe with pills, which will be medically safe but could put them at legal risk, or just simply end up having the children and end up parenting them instead.
낙태하지 못한 이들은 어떻게 될까?
We'll recruit the people who were just a little bit too slow in getting their abortion, people who were just barely under the limit, who managed to get their abortion just in time. So these two groups were really similar at baseline, and as we followed them over time, we see a lot of differences emerge. We asked women, why do you want to have this abortion? And the reasons they gave us were exactly what we found for the people who are denied. So for example, people say, I can't afford to have a baby. We see that people who are denied become poorer. They say, my relationship with the man involved, it's not good enough. And we see that the people who are denied, their relationships dissolve. They say, I want to take care of the children I already have. And we see that their existing children are more likely to be living in poverty, less likely to hit developmental milestones if they can't get an abortion. Every single reason that people gave us for why they want an abortion, that's exactly what happens to the people who are denied abortions.
결국 낙태를 범죄화하면 가장 피해 입는 것은 이미 소외된 사람들이다.
Roe v. Wade didn't guarantee access to abortion for everybody. Some people had access and other people didn't. And this is just going to further amplify that.
And I think that's a huge problem in America, that like Black, brown, indigenous women, other like women of color, people of color are kind of silenced in the medical world. They're not designed for people like me to thrive or to be healthy. It's going to criminalize people seeking out abortion care, which are mostly women, which are trans men, gender non-conforming people, non-binary people, people who are already marginalized.
Criminalizing abortion is not going to stop people from having abortions. It may put abortion out of reach for some people, actually for a lot of people who just aren't able to afford to be able to travel out of state to get the care that they need. But people have been self-managing their abortions for millennia. People find a way.
이미 1994년 카이로 국제인구개발회의에서 그동안 인구정책의 수단으로 다뤄졌던 낙태를 여성인권, 특히 재생산 권리 보장의 문제로 전환했다. 낙태가 범죄로 규정되면 현실의 사람들에게 어떤 일이 일어나는지, 그 영향을 국제사회가 인지하고 있다는 뜻이다.
So I think that it's too simple to say it's about fetal rights versus women's rights. That in fact it's much more complex because it's not just those two people. People who are pregnant often have kids already, and they also that they want to take care of. They also have kids that they want to have in the future under better circumstances. So already there's more people involved in this decision. And so if it's not a neat ethical question with just two parties, it's super complicated and the consequences are long lasting. And so people need to appreciate some of the nuance and not just boil it down to, a simple ethics question.
So when you criminalize one pregnancy outcome, you inadvertently end up inviting suspicion and criminalization into all the other pregnancy outcomes, including miscarriage and pregnancy loss. It was the bare minimum. But the fact that even that floor has been ripped away is devastating. And I think that people who oppose abortion really don't understand the implications of even that floor being ripped away. Yeah.
낙태가 합법일 때도 불법일 때도 낙태를 해야만 하는 상황에 놓인 사람들은 언제나 있었다.
My best estimate is that when states ban abortion, many people will travel, many people will order pills online, and about a quarter of the people will carry their pregnancies to term. So there will be a reduction in the short term in the number of abortions, but people who are unable to get an abortion and have a birth now, they won't have wanted births later. When someone's unable to get an abortion and they have a baby now with the wrong guy, under the wrong circumstances, we see in the Turnaway study they're actually less likely to have a wanted baby later. And that's because either they're already overburdened taking care of one child, but it also can be that kind of their life doesn't improve to a point where they feel that they're ready to have another child. So this won't be a long-term increase in birth rates. Instead, it will be making people have births earlier than they want.
낙태권을 보장한다는 것은 단순히 낙태에 대한 자기결정을 존중하는 것에 그치지 않는다. 그 결정이 현실에서 가능한 선택이 될 수 있도록 사회 경제적인 조건에 대해서도 함께 고민해야 한다.
I think the ceiling would be like everybody gets government-funded health insurance that pays for abortions, and also things like parental leave and support for childcare and all the other things that would allow people to truly make the decision to have a child with the most amount of support.
기자들은 사흘간 텍사스의 낙태권 옹호 시위를 취재했다. 그들은 왜 각자의 삶을 잠시 미뤄가면서까지 그토록 열렬히 시위하는 것일까? 그 답은 간단하다. 그 시위로 지켜내야만 하는 건 역시 자신의 삶이기 때문이다. 세계보건기구에 따르면 전 세계적으로 매년 7,300만 건의 낙태가 이루어진다. 원하지 않는 임신의 약 60%, 전체 임신의 약 30%가 낙태로 이어진다. 그만큼 낙태는 많은 이들이 받는 수술이다. 낙태를 범죄화하는 것은 낙태를 줄이지 못한다. 단지 낙태를 음지화하여 세계보건기구가 권고하는 방식 이외의 낙태가 이뤄지게 할 뿐이다. 이미 소외된 이들의 의료 접근성은 더 악화된다. 2022년 미국 연방대법원은 헌법상 기본권에서 낙태권을 삭제했다. 이 판결이 임신한 사람의 건강권에 어떤 파장을 불러일으킬지 충분히 숙고했다고 할 수 있을까? 연방대법원은 49년 전 여성의 출산을 결정할 권리와 태아의 생명권 사이의 균형점을 설정하려 했던 시도를 스스로 저버렸다.